There have been a few notable shifts in spaceflight and the focus of space medicine in the last 60-some years. In the tail end of the Cold War, military pilots in cramped capsules changed to shuttles crewed by scientists, and humanity set its sights on building the International Space Station instead of landing on the moon. These changes occurred largely due to political shifts, but in the modern era, we're seeing a shift in spaceflight that has far less to do with politics: the advent of commercial spaceflight. As private companies begin to dominate the space tech industries, more and more civilians are looking to the stars in a hope of seeing their home planet from afar. But how do we plan to keep these so-called spacecationers healthy in the incredibly rigorous environment they are so eager to travel to? Dominic and I will be answering these questions and examining how NASA and private companies are facing these challenges on today's episode of Spherical Cows. As always, I'm Nick Saba.
And I'm Dominic Tanzillo.
We're speaking today with Dr. Emmanuel Urquieta, a dual-appointed faculty member in the Department of Emergency Medicine and the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine.
He's also the Chief Medical Officer for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. That's TRISH, T-R-I-S-H, which is a NASA-funded department with Baylor and several other universities investigating health problems posed by space travel. And also in his free time, which I assume is limited, of course, he's both a pilot and scuba diver and does tons of other additional work with astronauts, aerospace medicine, and everything in between. Thank you so much for taking time to join us.
It is my pleasure to be here.
You've been working on the Inspiration4 launch, has had the opportunity to meet a lot of those astronauts working on this project. And I was really curious about some of the specifics of that work, both with TRISH and with kind of interfacing between private industry, aerospace. So I wanted to know kind of just your experience with the rocket launch, and then also maybe what research you are looking at with regards to astronauts and space health.
Just for people that haven't listened before or aren't familiar with a lot of the rocket launches, would you mind explaining what kind of Inspiration4 is and what the, inspiration behind it is as well?
Yeah, so the Inspiration4 mission is was the first all-civilian orbital mission. So it included 4 people just like you and I with normal jobs whose lives is not being professional astronauts. And they had a goal, and was to raise money for St. Jude's Cancer Hospital. So they basically designed a mission whose main goal was to fundraise for cancer in children. So Jared Isaacman, he's owner of some companies, including Shift for Payments and others. So he was the one who came up with the idea, and he just didn't want to give the other 3 spots to his friends or people that he knew, but rather he wanted to have people selected or people applying for these missions that really deserve to be in those positions. So the other 3 astronauts, they were selected through different processes. And this mission launched from Florida in September 15. I was lucky enough to be there as close as you can get to the launch. We have been working in this mission since March or April of this year to develop a really encompassing commercial spaceflight program, not only for this mission, but for future commercial spaceflight missions. This is just the first one. I'm sure that you guys and your audience have heard about the Virgin Galactic and the Blue Origin missions, also the MS-20 mission that launched on a Soyuz vehicle just last week on December 8th. And now we're looking at Axiom 1 on February 21st. So this is really the new, boom, no pun intended, of space, right? We're going to see incredible things happening and a lot of firsts. And one of the things that make me most excited is how diverse are these people flying to space, right? Yeah. This mission Inspiration4, Haley Arsenault, she is a cancer survivor. So we flew for the first time a cancer survivor and also a person with prosthetic device. So we're just going to keep seeing. Well, we also saw the youngest and the oldest people flying to space with Blue Origin in a matter of a couple
Yeah.
months. So we're going to see a lot of firsts and a lot of really exciting things.
Yeah, so you had all of the millionaires and billionaires going up in their rocket ships, of course, and so this one was, partnered with NASA and had the official all civilian orbital crew. I'm sure that that had some challenges for what that meant in terms of checking for health. And you said, that one of the astronauts was a cancer survivor. You had astronauts with prosthetics up there. How did that kind of change the pace with Inspiration4 compared to some of the other more recent missions?
Yeah, so this is a completely different world, right? And just to be fair with people that have been working in this business before, this is not the first civilian mission. We have had, I believe, 8 or so civilians flying to space before, all of them with space adventures with Soyuz vehicles. So there's already a lot of experience in certifying people with pre-existing medical conditions, having to get waivers and making sure they can go safely into space and come back, as safe as possible. So, what we're building now is based upon all of those developments in the past. Now, that being said, each commercial spaceflight provider has its own requirements, right? Which is a challenge because there's no standardized selection criteria for who is fit to go to space and who isn't. So a lot of these things are based on the design reference missions that you're going. If it's very different if it's a suborbital mission, 5 minutes or so, or if it's a full orbital mission for 3 days where you're going to be exposed more to radiation, these type of things, or if you're going to spend time on the ISS, right, like the International Space Station, like the MS-20 mission that just launched last week. So that is a challenge, but what is and I think those challenges are more responsibility of the commercial spaceflight providers. But the bigger challenge for us is what do we want to do with all the data and with the research results from these missions, right? So it would be actually a big loss, I would say, for science if there were multiple databases and multiple places where we stored these results from the missions. So we wanted to develop once we heard about this mission and we were invited to participate, was to develop a database and a program not only for Inspiration4, but for all future civilian missions into space, so that under the same program we can standardize the data that we collect. And then the end goal of this is not for us to keep the data, but to give it to other investigators so that they can do more research in this. And I think one of the biggest values is the fact that, as I was mentioning earlier, these are more diverse crews, right? With both from the age, from the gender, from the demographics perspectives, but also some of them have medical conditions. They're not as screened as your professional astronauts, as your NASA astronauts. So, and then the other thing is that just in the last few months, we have seen dozens of people flying to space, right? And normally this takes years in the government world. So this gives us really a very unique opportunity to increase the number of people who fly into space. Roughly only 607 people have flown into space, and I updated that chart with the last flight from Blue Origin, and that has been the last 60 years, right? I mean, it's a very small number. If you think about personalized medicine, predictive algorithms, these type of things, I mean, we're gonna need tens of thousands of people, right? And I think that commercial spaceflight has really good opportunities for us to be able to get those numbers, probably not tens of thousands, but in the thousands, perhaps in the next decade or so.
Yeah, and all these new astronauts and opportunities also means we're collecting different kinds of data as well. So we had previously talked about doing like genomic sequencing on the ISS, and clearly you're very heavily involved in microbiology and all things being a flight surgeon. So those civilians sent up, what exact kind of pieces of data were you able to collect? Like, what is this large bulwark of new data and information that we're getting in the modern age?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges, and I think one of the big differences between private astronauts and government astronauts, because these people are paying out of pocket to go to space, right? It's their money, and it's not a small amount of money to go into space. So really, they go there, with the expectation, yes, to enjoy space and the experience. So
To relax.
and to relax and to enjoy. So really, any second of the time that you ask them to, rather than opening the canopy and looking at the earth and taking pictures, if you tell, okay, I don't want you to spend all the time there, and instead of that, I want you to respond to surveys and take these ultrasounds and do these things. It is to the cost, number one, to their money, right? Because they paid for the mission,
Mm-hmm.
and also to their enjoyment. So any research program that you develop to collect research information from this very unique population needs to be as easy to do, as minimum time consuming, and as least unobtrusive as possible. Yet you want to collect maximize the quantity of data and also the quality of data you want to get, right? You want to make sure that the data is not just data, but it's good data that is going to be useful, number one, for civilian astronauts and also for NASA, right? So that is a challenge here, and I think we were successful with the Inspiration4 mission on finding projects that the astronauts were eager to participate, but at the same time we didn't ask them for hours of their time on a specific day. And we just met with them last week in New York, and they were all very positive. And even we asked them if they would do it again, and they would say absolutely. I mean, I would even do more science if I had the opportunity to do it. So I think we're on the right path.
We like hearing that, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of NASA astronaut selection. I imagine these people as well, that people with inclinations towards science and supporting research and new investigation. With all the new modalities that you are collecting, is there, maybe a personal favorite research question or topic that you're really excited might soon be answered with more people going to space, with growing data sets on it? Because, we've had microbiologists, but is there kind of a pet project and research interest that you really, want to know more about?
That's a tough question. I am often asked, like, what's my favorite project from the ones that we have, and I don't think I could tell you a single one. I mean, I think if I was able to choose one, I wouldn't say a project, but a capability to be developed would be to be able to select someone, or for you to have the tools to ensure that the person that is going to space has enough personalized medicine and preventive capabilities for that person not only to go to space safely, but to thrive in space, right? And I think we're in the right path to do that. And we have been, that experience with ISS the last 20 years. Astronauts have not only been able to survive, but actually to thrive, right? I mean, they do exercise, they do experiments, research. So I would say, having tools that will allow me to provide personalized and predictive medicine to anyone who flies into space. And by anyone, I mean kids, adults, older people. I think in commercial spaceflight, we're going to start seeing, and we are already seeing your non-traditional people flying to space, right? Like people really older, very young as compared to to traditional astronaut population. And this is just my professional opinion, but I think that in the next, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years, we're going to start seeing people going to space as as a vacation, right? Like you will go with your family to space, and we don't have any data on what happens to to kids in space, right? Are there any issues with the growth plate, or I mean, what happens to this population, or really old people, what happens to them? And if you're out there, you want to do pediatrics medicine or OBGYN or these things, and think that there's no connection with space, I think that in the next, like I said, maybe 10, 20 years, we will see literally all medical specialties needed in space, because we're going to be looking not only at going to ISS, right, or the future civilian space stations, but actually habitating other planets, the moon, Mars, planets, and that's a completely different story from what we have been doing. So I think, yeah, I think that makes me excited.
Right. And I think I've heard either the phrase from NASA and or TRISH that it's not just everybody in space, but every body in space. And a way of phrasing
Exactly.
it,
Yeah.
making, access and people of, different health and other
Mm-hmm.
biomarkers to really just expand the scope of people who, are able to wear the title of astronaut, and, to consider potentially, breaking past the atmosphere and experiencing weightlessness or going even further.
It's a wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful world where all are welcome.
yeah, and I think I mean that you're absolutely right. It's this is one of the things that commercial spaceflight provides, and it's what we will learn from people that have medical conditions going to space, right? These people will likely teach us some of the unknown unknowns and what we call the edge cases, right? How is a person with, say, a pre-existing MI, right? How are they going to deal with space? Or someone even with a cabbage, how are they going to deal if they want to go to space, right? Um, and we have never seen this before, right? Your traditional astronauts have been highly selected, highly screened, as healthy as possible, and that really burns down a lot of the risk, right? Because you know that you are at least checking all those boxes before they go into space. And with the civilian world, with commercial spaceflight, you're going to start seeing people that have medical conditions, and I mean we have seen, I'm sure, in suborbital flights, people with medical conditions just because of their age, and those ones will definitely teach us a lot of really really good lessons on what we can do, not only for commercial but also for long duration missions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely emphasizing that we're kind of in that new age of commercial spaceflight, and you've explained how we're looking at all these different kinds of astronauts and all this different kind of experiences that are going on up there, and how this is a whole new nut to crack open for space medicine and space health. If we could circle back, I've been sitting here thinking about how you collect data from non-government hired individuals. I keep thinking about this. You mentioned it. These people don't want to necessarily spend their space vacation collecting data. Is there a way that you like make that fun? Like, do you turn it into a game? Do you like kind of make a contest out of it? If you could talk about a specific example, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so most of these people, they feel absolutely privileged to be able to go to space, right? I mean, who can? I mean, if you're a professional astronaut, you say, "Yeah, I go to space. That's my job," right?
Yeah.
But well, and even though, right, like you were selected from 20,000 people or so, so even though you're very privileged, but like civilians that have normal jobs and go to space, it's most of the time it's a one time and that's it, right?
Mhm.
They'll never go back to space. So from that sense, in our experience, most of them feel the need to give something back or to do something to almost to pay the price of having that opportunity and going into space. And I think that doing research has checks all the boxes for doing that, right? You're doing something not only for you, but also for the rest of the people have gone into space. And a lot of these projects share the same issues that we encounter in isolated communities or extreme environments on Earth. So I think that's also a secondary thing that have a lot of value down to Earth on underserved populations or extreme environments medicine. I think that is the first thing. The second one is the message, right? Like you have to convey to them as easy as possible, why is this relevant? Why should I spend 5 minutes of my time answering this survey? And making that message clear on what is the value of that, it is absolutely key. And the third one, which I mean, these ones are not necessarily in order of importance, but we will discuss this one, is you need to make sure that you're using as minimum time as possible, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to ask for 20 minutes for a survey or 30 minutes for a procedure. So you want to make sure that it is as easy as possible. They're also eager to have access to their data to see how they perform, right? Like if you're doing, say, heart rate during launch, they want to go back and show to their friends, oh, look, I was pulling 5Gs and my heart rate didn't even change, like, stuff like that.
New
So,
high score. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, there are a lot of things that you can use for these. And yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can do this.
That's cool. Yeah. So I expect that might change as we get to more of a commercial kind of space flight, but who knows, I guess, with that one. Hopefully we'll be able to predict. So I guess the last question before we get into how you actually got here and what, you're an incredible journey to becoming a flight surgeon and working on Inspiration4 and all this stuff, is what is kind of your favorite identifier of what it takes to be an astronaut? Let's say we're kind of ditching the whole commercial space flight thing, right? Your traditional government hired astronaut. What is the most interesting thing, or like what's the stuff that they need to be an astronaut, in your opinion? Or what's your favorite bit, I guess?
That is a tough one. I mean, I think there's a lot of answers to that, but if I had to choose one, I would say people that don't think that there are boundaries, and either mental or physical, or atmosphere, whatever it is, right? I mean, most of the people that become astronauts, they have their professional pathways. In most of the cases, you see that they're always pushing boundaries, trying to go and see how far they can get in the envelope, right, as we call it, if you fly airplanes,
Yeah.
and trying to be out there, not following what everybody else does, but really pushing boundaries and finding new ways to do things. I think that's absolutely what you need, right? Especially even in the past, right? With the first astronauts, the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo astronauts, they flew for the first time in a vehicle that nobody else flew, right?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely pushing the envelope, right? It's people that are not afraid of doing things. Also, I think a really big quality is not being afraid to rejection, because most of the astronauts, I cannot say all of them, but maybe all of them have had to apply at least 2 times or more, right, to be an astronaut. I mean, there have been some cases that have applied 10 times, right, to be an astronaut. So you need to keep pushing, and if a door closes, you cannot just turn around and find another path in your career. Like, it's really what you have to do. Just push, open, and that is the type of mindset that you need if you want to go to space, right? Things in space are not easy.
I imagine
Very randomly, yeah.
I imagine that those two go, hand in hand, and never giving up, and there are no boundaries, kind of that
Yeah,
mindset.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and to maybe transition to a topic that I'm especially interested in is how you found aerospace and space medicine along your career trajectory. Much like me, I see that you started at least in and around helicopters, but maybe you had an underlying space interest the whole time, or maybe you discovered it along the way. Would you mind adding a little bit more about how you found ultimately aerospace?
Yeah, absolutely. So my pathway was definitely not not the traditional, as you and I were talking earlier. Since I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot, like an airplane pilot. That was my lifetime achievement. My dad is an aerospace engineer, and he worked doing maintenance for one of the biggest airliners in Mexico. And my granddad, he was a pilot. So I was raised in the aviation, and smelling avgas in the morning and stuff like that. And I always wanted to be a pilot. And I finished high school. I went to also these technical high schools where you get your high school degree, but you also learn some technical stuff. In my case, was airplane maintenance as part of high school.
Wow.
And then 9/11 happened when I was finishing high school. So I wanted to come to the U.S. to do aviation here, and it was not an option. So I I decided to go to pre-med in biology instead, and then medical school. So I mean, they're completely unrelated, but that's the pathway that I decided to follow. And then for 8 years or so in medical school, pre-med, all this stuff, I really put my passion on the back burner. In medical school, you definitely don't have time to the pilot school at the same time, right? After that, I wouldn't say after that, but probably in the last couple of years of medical school, when I had a little bit more time, I became a paramedic for the Mexican Red Cross, and I used to volunteer pretty much every weekend I was in the ambulances, driving them, or being in the back. I had a lot of fun. And I started meeting people in the helicopter. So in Mexico City, it's 20 million people. With 20 million people, there's a single helicopter EMS service with 7 helicopters that serves 20 million people. So they're pretty busy. So I started meeting them and stuff, and then I was able to apply for a position after I finished medical school. I did some training with them, plus my background as a paramedic for Mexican Red Cross, and that they hired me as a flight medic there. And most of the people there were EMTs and those type of things. So I was pretty much in charge of all of them, and giving them training and these type of things. And I worked there for a couple years. And when we were called to retrieve a patient, it was really an absolutely critical ill, right? When you have 7 helicopters for 20 million people, you cannot waste that flight for something minor. So I was in a couple of building collapses, a lot of things in Mexico City, even a terrorist attacking in a government building. The entire parking in the underground, it collapsed, and there were people with amputations and stuff. It was a difficult experience, but we were able to save 20, 30 people doing medevac from that scene. And I think that helped me to reprioritize my passions, right? It was a connection that I never thought existed, right, between aviation, what I wanted to do before going to college and medical school, and then I was able to use the things I learned in medical school, and I was flying a helicopter, and it was really nice. And then I found this program at Wright State that has aerospace medicine. And that you would be able to apply even if you were not from the U.S. So it took some time after that. After that, I did some emergency medicine training in Mexico. Then I also spent some time because I was in the helicopter for a couple of years, and then I wanted to prepare myself to come to the U.S. So I did some emergency medicine residency training in Mexico, and I was able to go to Africa for a couple of months. I was in Nigeria doing some medical missions there. And then, I applied to Wright State, and they accepted me. And then I moved to the U.S. to do aerospace medicine at Wright State. And that was absolutely what combined all of my passions. And after that, I was able to do my pilot training, and I got my pilot license. And I worked doing some research in Ohio after this. And then I heard about these things called the HERA, the Human Exploration Research Analog, which is you have to be a little bit crazy. And then they put you in a tin can with 3 other people for 30 or 45 days simulating a mission to Mars. And they see if you go crazy or if you survive. I'm still here, so I was okay. But that was like the next step, right? Like it just all of the puzzle pieces started coming together. Like I was there, and I needed all of the previous things that I have done, right? Like my medical training, experience in the helicopters, EMT, being in extreme environments in Africa, aerospace medicine, all of those things really clicked there. And after that, I found this place called TRISH, and started there almost 5 years ago. And I'm absolutely lucky and blessed enough to be the chief medical officer, and being able to really design part of the future of spaceflight. So it's I think it's what we're talking, right? It's not a traditional pathway, but it worked.
Let me first say, just talk about the right stuff coming full circle as soon as you just mentioned it, not giving up, all these discrete, maybe seemingly disparate paths all coming together. That's a fantastic way of, bringing all your interests and backgrounds together, which is really exciting. I think Nick and I both want to ask more about the HERA experiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
The HERA experiment.
I would love to know what it's like to be stuck in a tin can with a couple people for, a long time.
It's actually a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So, let me go back. So there's multiple analog missions, right? And some of there are really scientific, and some others are more like just for fun, right? So the one in NASA, the HERA, the Human Exploration Research Analog, it's an absolute scientific mission, and a lot of people apply for that. You have to go through medical screening. You have to go through psychological screening. Actually, I would say there's more psychological than physical screening. And then they want to make sure that you have the right personality. That number one is, so what they call is astronaut-like subjects, right?
Yes.
Because you cannot choose anybody who wants to apply and
Yeah,
send them there and see how it works, right?
this isn't your college roommate pairing kind of situation. Yeah.
Exactly. For the main reason that the results that you get from these analogs, they're spaceflight analogs, right? So you want to make sure that what you get from these is
Analogous.
something that you can then translate into space, right? And if you don't have the similar population, like your college roommate, I mean, he or she doesn't look like an astronaut on the space station, right? So what you learn from that person, it's very difficult will translate into something that you can actually use in space. So number one, you need to make sure that it is what they call astronaut-like subjects. And that gives you another layer of certainty and assurance that they're not going to kill themselves when they're in a in a tinker, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a small place for people, and you don't have communications with the outside world. There's actually no windows. There's no internet. The only communications that you have is with the mission control, and they induce a lot of stress in you, as you would expect in spaceflight, right? So a lot of the research wants to see how far can you get while you're still operationally driven in an environment like that.
And what kind of stressors did they incorporate? Like waking you up early, playing alarms?
Yeah, well, so yeah, there's a bunch of them. One of the main things that they want to test in these scenarios is how will the crew perform without having real-time communications, right? Because that's one of the big challenges that we'll encounter in a mission to Mars. It's going to be a 40-minute time delay communication. So if something happens, you cannot just grab the phone and call mission control, right? It will take 40 minutes. And if there's a medical emergency, you're pretty much getting all the time in the golden hour, right? So it's just not feasible. So a lot of the things that they test there is task ambiguity. That's how it's called. So that they want to see how you would react to, say, a simulated medical emergency or a simulated issue with a spacecraft without having someone to ask on how to solve it. And there's also, how you would work without sleeping for, extended periods of time, and you get still stress being induced on you. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that are absolutely operationally relevant in these scenarios. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's a single ideal analog, right? I mean, this one specifically, the HERA is really good for this type of testing. Other analogs in other places are better for other things. But at least for the research that they aim to do there, it's a really good analog.
Mm-hmm. And so you basically went through astronaut boot camp almost with these people. Do you still keep in contact with any of your crewmates? Did you guys come out very strong, or were
absolutely,
you guys were tested and were ready to leave after the end of 30 days, or were you coming out a band of brothers and sisters?
No, absolutely, we are. I mean, this was 2016, and we still talk to each other. I think one of the things that also have operational value is what is your selection criteria, right? And what you want to select has to do with the type of mission that you want to do. Like, if it's you can see this in the astronaut selection, like the first astronauts on missions to, just to prove capabilities, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, all of them were military people, right? Because you wanted someone that would put mission first, and everything else would be behind, right? In any personal things. Then you started seeing the shuttle program, and you start seeing a lot of people with mostly scientific background, right? Not necessarily military. They do the same thing on these missions. They want to select 4 personalities that will work with each other, and will be synergistic rather than keeping everybody not together. So no, yeah, they do a really good job with that. So yeah, the other three participants are my very good friends, and we keep in touch.
Yeah, wonderful. In the course Nick and I made, we do talk about personality selection being a factor that is relevant for, of course, astronauts, and I think the deep space implications of a time delay under stress, limited resources, that all really emphasizes why communication, teamwork is so important. But I also think it really does highlight why kind of your different backgrounds is kind of interesting, right? The field of aerospace medicine draws on so many different disciplines. You mentioned both working in a urban environment in emergency medicine helicopter evacuations. Obviously, you get the elevations and the altitude information relevant for leaving Earth's atmosphere. But then you also worked in, as you said, low resource environments where you don't necessarily have all the luxuries of, all the facilities of particular hospitals when, you were doing your service around the globe. So it is really interesting to me to see how all that comes together then in space.
Yep.
Yeah, and even more than that, isolated environments, right? We talked about HERA 11, I believe, and that's another thing I think with civilian space industry is people aren't used to living isolated today. That's just not a thing. You said no internet in the HERA 11 experiment, and that sent a spike off in my brain. I don't know what I'd do with myself for that amount of time. But
yeah, no, that was it was a challenge. I mean, like Dominic was saying, it's not like they throw you in the tin can right away. There's a period of training and getting to know your team members and all of these things. So you just start getting used to that. And actually, when you leave, it's actually weird to have to actually have a wallet in your pocket or a cell phone, right? Like, it feels like it's heavy, right? Where you have been using it all your life. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
I could almost imagine people paying a lot of money to do a retreat like this, right? When they go off and disconnect from the internet, many people nowadays want to, take time away from it. And then you could contribute to a NASA research study. Well, that sounds maybe like the best of two worlds.
I got a retreat for free, and I get to eat astronaut food because we were eating the same food at the ISS. So yeah, there you go.
It sounds like one of those experiences that you love doing once, but you don't really want to do it again.
Actually, you know what? I would do it again.
Oh, okay.
I think that being an experience like that, even though it was not space, but it was as close as we can do on Earth, space environment, it gives me a very unique understanding of what they feel, what they go through, and what is it to have a schedule that is also chasing you all the time, and I think that allows me to be a better science manager as a chief medical officer to develop this, because otherwise you are working without without understanding your customer, if you want to call it that way. So I think it has helped me a lot from that perspective.
And I think that really does highlight flight surgeon, right? They like flight surgeons who have interest or experience in flying to really understand the pushes and the pulls, the draws in the environment, because if you're a clinician who is completely separated from the world of flight, it can be a hard time to empathize with maybe a pilot or an astronaut who's hiding a medical condition because they want to go up and experience some of the thrills and joys of flying. And I think your experience there gives you a really good understanding of maybe some of the excitements, but also some of the stressors, and to be a better clinician with astronauts in general.
Absolutely. It's putting yourself on the feet of on the shoes of the person that you have to take care of, or in this case to do research for on their behalf. So absolutely, yeah.
And in your kind of experience, running all of these research projects and working closely with astronauts, have you ever kind of had major problems either in data collection or just experimental design in itself?
I don't think so. Again, going back to your question of what would be a good description of an astronaut, right? We're talking about people who push the envelope and keep opening doors. I think that all of the astronauts, and again, regardless if they're civilian or government, they have this need to push boundaries. And even with the civilians, you can see that Jared Isaacman, he flies high profile airplanes, right? High performance airplanes. There are people that by nature they're pushing boundaries. They want to do more. So if you give them a task, it's not the type of personality that will just read it and say, okay, I'm not going to do it, or I'm just not going to follow procedures. People that are driven by that need and by that nature. So they will do it as best as they can. So no, I don't think we have ever had an experience like that. And again, it goes back to your question of what are the qualities of an astronaut.
As someone that works in research, I envy you for that.
Yeah, definitely way different than a clinical trial. Yeah.
And I think that is a really good segue to our question of the show. We want to ask everyone the general question of what is a piece of advice you would give to a student or someone looking to get into the aerospace medicine field? Not necessarily an astronaut, because it's somewhat of a different path. Although recently, in the most recent astronaut class, we actually have the medical officer from SpaceX as one
Yep.
of the NASA selected astronauts, which for anyone in the space medicine or adjacent fields, terrifically exciting. Two other astronauts with tons of clinical and medical experiences. So, there's definitely a need to be an astronaut, provider, clinician. But for someone wanting to go more into the aerospace medicine route, what advice or information might you provide to someone looking to change or expand their course of study and focus?
Yeah, well, I would say to be as proactive as possible with people, right? We're in an absolutely incredible time to be in this field, right? There's now it's not only government flights, but civilian companies in the civilian world. And I mean, we know the main ones, right? Like SpaceX, Blue Origin, all of these ones. But I mean, there's hundreds of startups in commercial spaceflight. I think the opportunity is absolutely incredible. So, what I would suggest is just to start contacting people, start getting involved in projects. I mean, most of us are absolutely eager to help anybody who is interested in this, like even offering projects or mentoring, whatever is needed. I mean, we got here doing the same, right? I mean, nobody gets a golden door like the golden ticket from the chocolate factory exactly. And it takes effort, it takes time, it takes getting a lot of doors closed in front of you, and the opportunities are there. So it's just getting yourself in the field.
And stay passionate, I'm sure, as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think also not to try to develop your lifetime plan when you're in high school, right? I mean, that I don't think that ever works. So yeah, I would say just follow your passion and talk to people, get involved, and have a lot of patience, right? This is space flight. It's not easy. It's challenging. It's difficult. Takes time, but it's one of the coolest things that you can do in your life. So
Is there places that people can find you or follow you on social media? Places that we can make sure? I know Trish actually is recording and releasing now a documentary on some of the health challenges of spaceflight. Any other work that you also want to share and publicize?
Or programs that you would
yeah,
like to.
so at TRISH we have the postdoctoral fellowship program. It's actually open. We're receiving applications for that. We also have what we call the Red Risk School. So it's a series of lectures on spaceflight issues. Um, we also have a newsletter that you can sign up at Trish. And if you're further along in your career, we have funding opportunities for space biomedical research, and more on a personal side, but also from the Trish and Baylor side. I'm always happy to take one or two students and working some articles with them. I've had multiple articles with students. They're the first author, and we work on an article that is useful for them and for us. Yeah, I think those are the main things. And you can find my email at the Trish website is bcm.edu/space health. Happy to get any emails and find projects for whoever is interested.
Yeah. So if you're interested in connecting into the space medicine kind of world or asking Dr. Urquieta more questions, we will post those links and all of the different opportunities that he listed below. Dr. Urquieta, I just want to take this moment to say thank you so much for coming here and talking to us. Honestly, your life story is incredible. Like the path that you took to get here is enviable, and I know it was probably not very easy. So it was incredible getting to talk to you and getting to ask questions. Pass it over to Dominic in case there's any last questions.
No, I mean, wonderful. And thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciated your time and love that so much of your story and advice is, applicable to so many different people. As you were saying, don't necessarily make your plan in high school. This is true for people who want to be an astronaut. So many people want to be astronauts, right? And with the rates of selection, not the best odds, right? But I think you were really highlighting the idea that you should optimize for just a good life in general, and then always be aware of opportunities that you are the perfect niche for, because there will be something that comes along that matches your skill set, your background, your interest, and just being aware and being tapped into those networks. And I think it's hard to find better advice than that.
No, it was a lot of fun, Dominic. Nick, thank you very much for having me, and yeah, happy to talk to you guys and your audience.
Yeah. So as always here on Spherical Cow, we like to sign off with our classic tagline: "Stay oxygenated, everybody."
Stay oxygenated.
Stay oxygenated. I love it.
Thank you. We'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.